Buying a condo in downtown Chicago is a more complex process than you might think, but I'm going to talk you through what you need to know from the homeowner's perspective. First of all, as a disclaimer, I am not a realtor and I am not someone who works in the real estate space. I'm just a homeowner. But I am a homeowner who has purchased several different types of homes, from single family homes to non-downtown condos to now a downtown condo in Chicago. So from my perspective, or this video will be told from my perspective as a homeowner, home buyer, not as a professional in real estate. The process of buying a condo here in Chicago is more complicated than I thought it would be. So I thought it would be helpful to create a video to help talk people through what we did that kept ourselves sane during the buying process so that we could stay organized and make a well-informed decision. So the first thing I wanted to talk about are costs that you should consider. When you're looking at buying a condo here in Chicago, you're not just looking at the cost of like the mortgage amount or the asking price of the condo. There are other costs that you'll want to think about that kind of can total up to what your monthly output will be. One of those, and probably the most important to consider, is the HOA fee. So you will have a monthly HOA fee. Some people will call those assessments, and that will cover amenities such as, a pool, a fitness center, building maintenance. You might have an event room or a business center or, a doorman. Like those kinds of things will all be included in like an HOA fee. It can sometimes also include things like your internet, your cable television, those kinds of things as well, and utilities. So, but not all HOAs include all of the same things. So one of the things that you'll want to think about is not just how much is the monthly HOA fee, but what is included in the cost of that HOA fee. And I'll walk you through some examples of some houses that are on the market right now, just to kind of help you understand the process of how I evaluated these things. But an HOA fee is one of the things you'll want to consider. That is a monthly cost on top of your mortgage amount. In addition to HOA fees, there can be things called special assessments. Now, these are not things you would pay monthly, but it is something to consider to make sure that you have savings and money set aside in the event that a special assessment would occur. And a special assessment could be something like the building has decided to replace all of the windows. Well, you as a condo owner are responsible for the cost of the replacement of those windows. Even if the building decides it and you're not necessarily ready to do it, they can basically say, well, we're going to have a special assessment this year and it's going to cover the cost of replacement windows. Sometimes they'll do special assessments for like pet amenities. For instance, in our building, they were looking at putting in a dog relief area because that's something that we didn't originally when we moved into this building. And they had considered, if they did that, putting in like a special assessment for pet owners, in the building to help cover the cost of putting in a pet relief area. Now, we ultimately landed on not doing the special assessment, so it didn't end up turning into anything, but it would have been something that potentially would have cost us as dog owners, if they had decided to do it that way. So just something to think about. In addition, the other cost kind of that goes into your mortgage, and this is also true in a single family home as well, but that's going to be taxes. And taxes here in downtown Chicago can be pretty high, and they can vary dramatically depending on the location of where you are within the downtown area. Even something that like buildings we can see literally out of our window can be in a vastly different tax, bracket than we are and cost more in taxes. So that is something you will want to consider and something that you'll want to calculate when you're thinking about your monthly costs. The next step would be parking. So a parking spot in your building is not always a guarantee. Some buildings don't have parking. I don't know of very many condo buildings that don't at least have a parking garage. Most of them do. But parking is an additional cost. So generally it's a cost above your mortgage. So for instance, if the asking price on the house is $400,000, they might be also asking another $50,000 for a parking spot. So if you are someone who has a car, that will be an addition to your mortgage amount. So, instead of $400,000 for the condo, you would be paying $450,000 for the condo and the parking spot. Sometimes you can negotiate with the seller on that and get that price negotiated down. But those are things that you will see is an extra cost for parking. If you don't want to purchase a parking spot, and you still have a car, you could also consider renting. So many parking spots in the building are available for a monthly fee. So that would just be another monthly cost you'd want to factor in if you are someone who has a car. And then lastly, the costs to consider are closing costs, which are incredibly high here in Chicago. And I was warned before we went into our closing that closing costs were very expensive here. But I'll tell you, it was in the ballpark of about 3 to 4 times what I was used to. And Chris and I have purchased about 5 homes. This is, I think, our 5th or 6th. I can't remember actually how many we've had together. I'd have to sit down and do the math. And so I'm very familiar with closing costs. It's something I've paid lots of times, but it was a surprising number when we closed on this condo here. So that is something you'll want to consider, because in addition to your down payment, you'll need to have a considerable amount of money set aside for the cost of closing. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that lawyers are involved in closings here in Chicago, which is actually a really nice benefit to have. They help with all of the negotiations and ensure that you're getting everything that you need and that you're protected in the, the contract and that purchase. But it is an added cost, and it does make closing costs more expensive. Okay, so it may sound like I'm making it sound very expensive to live in Chicago, and it actually isn't like outrageously expensive. It is affordable, and you can find places to live here that are, not an insane amount of money. But I think it is good to go in as a home buyer informed of kind of all of the things that you need to consider from like a cost perspective that are above and beyond just that asking price that you see on realtor.com. But I did want to also talk through some of the factors that are included and what impact kind of the price overall. So these factors can include changes or impacts to the mortgage amount, the asking price, but also even the HOA, right? So one of the things that would affect your mortgage asking price is obviously potentially square footage. Obviously, a higher square footage place is likely to sell for more than a place that has less square footage. So generally, the larger you go, the more expensive it will be. However, not all square footage is created equal. Some buildings are just more expensive than others. You can find units that are the same exact square footage, but vary in hundreds of thousands of dollars in cost difference overall. And that a lot of it can be because of location of where that building is. What is the building? There are some buildings that are very desired and cost a lot. Some buildings are really super high amenity buildings. The location of that building, is it something that's like got Great Lake access versus one that maybe has less Great Lake access? Those kinds of things all factor into the cost overall of what you're kind of paying per square foot. But square footage is certainly one of those things that will impact the cost. So in addition to square footage, there are, of course, other things that are going to affect kind of the overall asking price of the unit. A lot of those things, of course, are finishings in the unit. I mean, that's very similar to really anywhere that you'd be buying real estate. Obviously, a house that's recently been remodeled is going to go for more than a house that, maybe needs a lot of remodeling and work. So you'll see the same kind of situation across condos. You might be moving into a building even that is kind of an older building versus a building that is newer and, has just been built and has all of the newest, latest, and greatest technologies and features and those kinds of things. So obviously there's a difference in price there. For instance, we live in an older building, but we do happen to live in a really nice building, a really desired building in the area, which is really great. But our building is older. It's not, a brand new building with, the floor to ceiling windows that span across, the whole space. We do live in an older building. We live in a historical building. So that is different than living in kind of like one of the brand new high rises, that are 80 stories tall, those kinds of things. But those are things that can affect your price too. Also, the view. So if you have expansive lake views, that is naturally going to increase the overall asking price of the condo versus a view that maybe doesn't look at the lake, for instance. Or if you're fortunate enough to be in a building that is not just lake views, but you also get river views, that's also going to tick up that price. So those are all things that are going to affect your overall kind of monthly cost when you're looking at that like mortgage asking price on realtor.com, for instance. But really, my recommendation overall is to think about what is your maximum monthly output. So I find that, in past years when Chris and I have like looked at houses and bought houses, we've sort of had a kind of dollar amount of like, well, we are looking for houses in, from this range to this range, right, in cost. And what I'll show you, I'll walk through some examples. You'll see that like it's harder to do that here in Chicago. You can't just say, my price range is, $450,000 to $550,000. That doesn't really work, because when you factor in all of the other kind of variables coming into your monthly payment, you could find one that's maybe on the lower end of that range, but has a really high HOA and is maybe in an area that has really high taxes, and suddenly your monthly output is more than you can afford. So I think a really smart way to do it is to think about what is your goal for your monthly output. What is the maximum amount of money that you want to spend on a monthly basis going toward your home payment, including, taxes, HOA, as well as your mortgage. And that is, I think, a really smart way to do it, because then you can kind of work backward from there and figure out, okay, this either is or isn't in my price range based on kind of the combination of all of the things that are costing me money. I do have some additional things that are just good to consider. Some of them are like kind of hard lessons learned, things that we go, oh, I wish we had known that before you bought our place, that I'd like to also share. But I think it would actually be a really good time to go ahead and dive into the examples, because they're really more around kind of figuring out the cost component. So I will do a screen share here and kind of dive into some of the examples and like sort of what I did from a mathematical standpoint when we were shopping for our condo. And then I'll hop into kind of the additional tips at the end of the video. Okay, so what I did is I took kind of a selection of different condos available for sale right now on realtor.com, and I put them into an Airtable base. This is very similar to a spreadsheet. I used an Excel spreadsheet when I did this for ourselves, and this is a very simple version, but basically what I did is I took, again, some from realtor.com. I have the actual links, like hyperlinks to the realtor.com listing right over here for easy access. I have the realtor.com link here for easy access. Scroll back over. But I kept it pretty simple. I have the condo address here. I did go ahead and put it by neighborhood, and that's just because in Airtable you can like group it different ways. So I created like a by neighborhood view. So I could, if you were like, oh, I really want to be in the South Loop, for instance, you could kind of have it where you are specifically looking at those for the moment, or at least kind of doing maybe some comparables to look at kind of, okay, across River North, they're all kind of roughly in that similar, cost, that kind of thing. But we'll look at sort of all of them here. I did list the asking price. I also listed the HOA fee, so the monthly cost for the HOA. I did go ahead and list out the monthly taxes, as well as the estimated monthly payment. So the estimated monthly payment is going to include your taxes, your HOA fee, as well as your mortgage, effectively. So if you were to purchase this unit here for the $379,000, and put 20% down, it's basically like, what is your mortgage plus the HOA fee plus the monthly taxes that you'd be expected to pay. So that's effectively how I set this up. I did also list the square footage over here when it was given. You can see there was a couple that didn't list the square footage, and that's really to show that I pretty much tried to look at things that were relatively comparable from a size perspective. I obviously didn't want to look at a condo that was like 2,500 square feet, compared to one that was like 1,200. That's obviously very different. So I tried to keep them relatively comparable. But you can see the prices kind of range, anywhere from kind of in the upper 300s to the mid 500s. I also did include over here what is included in the HOA versus not. So gas, electric, really heat, air, effectively, water, internet, cable TV. There's a lot of other things that can be included in your HOA fee. I just chose kind of some of the main ones. So you'd want to choose the ones that are specific and matter to you. Same thing here with the amenities. I did list out some of the amenities that they have. Like, for instance, for us, it's very important that they allow pets. We have, a dog and a cat. So we need to have a building that allows not just pets, but also both dogs and cats. Because there are some buildings that only allow cats. There are some buildings that only allow dogs. So for me, I wanted to make sure we included a building, obviously, I wouldn't have even looked at a building that didn't allow pets. Like, that would have been a waste of our time. A fitness center, that's a deal breaker for me. I would not have considered looking at a building that doesn't have a fitness center. So that's one that I would call out. A rooftop deck, I think that's a nice amenity. So I listed that one here. Pet relief area, most of them don't mention it. So it's hard to say. There weren't a lot that gave that, but that was one I thought I would list. 24-hour door staff, that's an amenity that I thought would be worth listing. Obviously, there are a lot more amenities. Some buildings have pools, some buildings have hot tubs, some buildings have, event rooms. There's all kinds of theater rooms. There's all kinds of different amenities that buildings offer. So really what I would recommend is whatever amenities are important to you, list those so that you know that you're looking at a building that either has or doesn't have that particular amenity if it's important to you. So that's just kind of how I set it up. This was just to give an example and an idea of sort of how I set this up. Okay. So once you kind of have this set up with the information that you're interested in looking at, like the amenities, what's included in the HOA, those kinds of things, what I've done here is I sorted this by the estimated monthly payment. So basically the lowest monthly payment is here on top, all the way down to the most expensive monthly payment. But what I think is interesting, and this is what I wanted to kind of point out, is that it's not necessarily, always fair to say, well, a high asking price means it's going to be out of the range for my maximum monthly payment. So for instance, if you had like $4,500 for your maximum monthly payment, that would effectively put you kind of right here in this range, on this line here, right? Because this one is like 4,570. So it's basically at your max. And so you can see this one here at at your maximum of $4,500 a month is $485,000 overall. But what's interesting is up here, just a few lines up, you've got this one where the asking price is $515. But the monthly output is only $4,267. So if you were maxing yourself on asking price only, and what if you capped it at $500,000, you wouldn't even see this unit come up as an option. So I think it is important and smart to kind of not ignore the asking price, because obviously, like, the higher the asking price, the higher the mortgage, like, clearly, like, there is a mathematical component to that. But I think what's beneficial is maybe allow yourself to look a little higher from an asking price standpoint, but pay attention to like the taxes and the HOA, because what you can see here is this one is $515,000, so it is a little bit more expensive than the one down here that's $485,000. I mean, it's only about $30,000 difference, but it is different, right? But you can see that the HOA is less, because the HOA here is only $777 versus $1,263. So that means for basically almost $1,300 a month of your payment is going toward your HOA versus closer to $800. That's a significant difference. That's $400 a month just going toward your HOA fee. And then taxes also are a difference here. So you can see the taxes for this one are only $700 a month, whereas this one here are at, I'm sorry, that's about the same actually. It's $680. So that's pretty comparable. But what I think would be important to look at here is what is included though in that HOA cost, because this one here at the $4,570 was a more expensive HOA. It was nearly $1,300 a month. It does though include, it's unknown on gas, it didn't mention on realtor.com, but it does include, it looks like, your internet, your cable. So that's important, right? Those are important things. It's like, because those are extra costs. If you had to pay internet and you had to pay cable, that might be another $100 a month or whatever. So you can kind of factor that in and say, well, if that wasn't included, that would matter. The other thing, I'm losing my line. Yeah, I'm going to click on it here so I know which one I'm looking at. So the other thing that one includes is it does include a fitness center. It does allow pets. It's unknown whether or not there's a rooftop deck, so that's something you'd want to confirm with a realtor. And it does have 24-hour door staff. So those are amenities that are included. Again, you could add more to this list if that was something that was interesting to you. Okay, but let's take a look now at that other one. So again, you're paying almost $1,300 a month for those assessments, and that's everything that you're getting included in those assessments, or at least several of the things included, right? So let's go back up to this one here that again was a higher asking price but a lower monthly output, and let's see what's included. So that one also includes, it actually includes gas, electric, water, as well as internet and cable. So some very, very comparable from that standpoint. Also does have a fitness center, allows pets. It does not have a rooftop deck. Again, the other one was unknown. And then it does have 24-hour door staff. So you're looking at two pretty comparable units from a standpoint of amenities, at least on my basic list, right? I mean, I realize there's obviously more to it than just the amenities I've listed here. But relatively comparable. Again, $400 a month different in the HOA fee. So that is something that really kind of does matter. I did want to take a quick gander at the square footage. So that one is $1,290. And the one here was $1,225. So you're also getting even just a little bit more square footage. So I realize this is not maybe just like, it's not an exact science, but I thought it might be beneficial just to kind of show you what my thinking process was. For us, I genuinely kind of said, okay, here's my out-of-pocket max. And then I put all of the houses that we were looking at into a matrix very similar to this one, so that I could kind of tell, okay, how much am I paying monthly overall, HOA, taxes, and mortgage, and what am I getting with that money, right? Because truth be told, there were a couple units we looked at that we really, really liked, but they were considerably higher from a monthly output standpoint. And honestly, from an amenity standpoint, we're quite comparable. So, we ended up choosing the place that we did. But I do think that's an important way to look at it when you're thinking about all of the costs, because it isn't quite as easy as just looking at the asking price, because just trying to kind of figure out, hey, well, what's my mortgage going to be is really only one piece of that puzzle. So don't discount that HOA and how impactful it can be. All right, let's look at one more example just to kind of illustrate my point. So let's look at ones that I've got 2 units selected here that are both the same asking price. So the asking price for both units is $425,000, but there is a significant difference in their HOA cost. So you have this one down here is an HOA of nearly $1,200 a month, and this one is about $534, so just a little over $500 a month. That's a considerable difference there in your monthly output. This one also has lower taxes, incidentally, by about, $80. So, also a monthly savings. So you can see the output is quite different. This one's only about $3,500, whereas this one's about $4,200. So you've got a difference overall of about $700 a month. And all of that contributed to by the HOA and the taxes. Has nothing to do with the asking price, because they're exactly the same asking price. So that is an interesting piece, but let's take a look at what's included, because again, that is part of it. So for instance, this one here that was the lower price overall does not include your gas and electric. So those are some utilities you would have to pay above and beyond the cost of your HOA fee. So yeah, you may be saving $700 a month in your HOA fee, but how much are you going to be paying for your heating and cooling? Does that make up for part of it? This one does happen to include internet and cable, which that's good. But incidentally, this one down here that had the higher HOA does not include internet and cable. So if you factor probably about $100 a month, I'm guessing maybe $150 for internet and cable, then that kind of offsets that too, right? So kind of the other direction. So you have to kind of think about what is the extra now monthly cost, because this one here had that $1,200 a month, nearly HOA fee, and now you're also going to have to pay for your internet and then cable TV if you do in fact want cable TV. Now, obviously, this one would be out for us because this one does not allow dogs. But nevertheless, let's pretend it does, because I wanted to look at the other amenities to see how comparable they were. So they both have a fitness center, so that's great. This one with the higher HOA does have a rooftop deck, whereas the one with the lower HOA does not have a rooftop deck. You just would have to decide for yourself if that's something that matters to you. It may not, and that's fine. And then the other real big difference here, and this is actually probably the biggest reason for the discrepancy in the HOA fee, is you can see that this one with the lower HOA fee does not include 24-hour door staff, whereas the one with the higher HOA fee does have 24-hour door staff. So if that's something that's important to you, it might be worth that extra monthly cost to cover it. But I did want to just kind of demonstrate how asking price is not really the only price you can look at. It's just the really important thing is to consider what is that HOA fee. They can be dramatically different. I've actually seen units that have HOA fees in the thousands, over 2,000. I've seen them as high as $3,000. For units that are kind of comparable to this one. They can be very, very expensive. So it is absolutely something you'll want to look at. It's something you'll want to consider. It's most likely something your realtor is going to bring to your attention. But as a home buyer, I think it's important to know going into it that you're not just thinking about your monthly mortgage cost, you're also thinking about that HOA fee too, because it makes a really big difference. Okay, so now that we have covered the costs and kind of the factors contributing to costs and the things that you need to think about, I did want to go ahead and give just a couple of additional things that I think are worth considering, just like factors and check boxes you'll want to make sure that you've got a list, so that you can kind of go through and check them off as you're looking. So pets, of course, are one of the things. We are pet owners, so for us that was a very important piece. As I mentioned, there are buildings that don't allow pets, so it is definitely something you want to make sure that you let your realtor know. If you're somebody who's got pets, that, hey, we have a cat or we have a dog or we've got, cats or dogs or, whatever the case may be, or both, so that your realtor knows not to guide you to buildings that won't allow pets, because that is an important piece. Also, pet limits. So there may be a limit on how many pets they offer. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a condo here that allows more than 2. So that's also something that you'll want to think about. There also could be limits on weight. In fact, I think even our building has a weight restriction for pets. I think that we have some pets here that are probably over the weight restriction. But a lot of buildings do have a pet restriction, a weight restriction. So they might be like, oh, no pets over, 100 pounds. So if you have like a Bernese Mountain Dog or a really large dog, that might be a problem, right? A St. Bernard or something like that. So that's something that you'll want to consider as well, because there are sometimes like pet like rules or limits or restrictions, based on the building, the type of building. And then the other thing that you'll really want to think about, and this is something that Chris and I did not think about when we moved here, and we sorely regretted it, and that is a pet relief area. So it's okay if your building doesn't necessarily have a pet relief area, but you'll want to make sure, if you have dogs, it's obviously different for cats because they can use a litter box, but for dogs, you'll want to at least pay attention to, like, is there a park near us? Now, we, by happy accident, happened to choose a condo that has a park right across the street. So it was very convenient for us. We were really grateful because that's not something that we considered when we moved here. We just completely didn't even think about letting Weasel out to go potty because, we had Weasel at the time, and it wasn't even something that was on our list. But thankfully, there was a park right across the street, very convenient, because our building at the time did not have a pet relief area. They have since put one in, but we did not have one when we first moved in. So some buildings may not have a park near them, but they have a pet relief area. And so if that will work for you, then that's great. But it is absolutely something you'll want to consider and make sure you have on your list if you're a pet owner. Another thing that you'll want to think about is remodeling. Something that Chris and I have done in all of our homes really is remodeled. We have bought a lot of homes that have needed some tender love and care, and we've rolled up our sleeves and used our own elbow grease to do that, right? We've remodeled kitchens, we've replaced flooring, we've remodeled bathrooms, we've pretty much done it all, and thankfully Chris and I both are actually pretty handy and able to do a lot of those things, so in homes that we've lived in the past, that has not been a problem for us. It is different here in Chicago. So there's a few things you have to think about with remodeling. So if you're thinking about, I really like this condo, but it needs some work, needs a remodeled kitchen or it needs whatever. There's a few things to consider there. Number one, there is very little true remodeling that you can do yourself as a homeowner. Very little of it is permitted. So most of the time you have to have a contractor who's licensed and bonded with the city, and also usually approved by your building. So it's not an easy prospect to remodel in a condo. As a result of that, it's not something that's like, I'm really handy, so I can just replace these cabinets. It's not going to be that simple. And it's not going to be allowed. You as a homeowner, we can get away with some small things, like we can paint. Obviously, like we can replace like a faucet or a light fixture, a little thing like that. But when it comes to like true remodeling, we really are not permitted to do that in our unit because as a condo, at least here in downtown Chicago, that's just not something that's allowed. You would have to have a contractor. The other thing is you have to have your plans approved by the board in your building. So that can take some time. So it's not something that can happen right away. So it's just something that you'll want to think about. If you're thinking about buying a place that's maybe like a fixer-upper or needs some work, consider the fact that you're going to have to go through board approval for any kind of updates that you're doing. You're going to have to work with a contractor who's licensed and bonded in the city as well as approved by your building. And you're not really going to be able to do a lot of that on your own. With that comes cost associated. It is pretty expensive to remodel here in Chicago. It just tends to cost more. I think a lot of that is because it's not very easy to like demo and get rid of stuff when you're, however many floors in the air and have to lug things down and, you have to reserve your service elevator for the day and, to get things out and all of that. So it's a lot of kind of hassle for the building. It's a lot of hassle for the contractor, and that comes with a pretty hefty price tag. So that is something to think about if you are looking at houses and you're thinking, no big deal, we could just remodel this bathroom. That's great. Just know it's going to come with a pretty good price tag, and it may not be something that you'll be able to do immediately. Another factor I wanted to bring up is the laundry facilities. So not all buildings have in-unit washer and dryers. We are fortunate to have a washer and dryer in our unit because our building was again converted into condos in the early 2000s. You'll find this is most common in the buildings that were built in, I think, like the 40s and 60s. I'm sorry, the 50s and 60s is what I meant to say. A lot of those buildings were built without washers and dryers in the units. They have like laundry facilities in like a basement or on, a single floor, and everyone uses those. Effectively kind of like a coin laundry or like a laundromat, but it's just, specific to your building. And which is totally something that's doable. And if that's okay with you, that can be something that you can say to your realtor, hey, I'm okay if I don't have an in-unit washer and dryer, but you do want to make sure that you talk to your realtor if it does matter to you, that you have an in-unit washer and dryer, because there are some buildings where you are able to add one and some where you're not. So what you wouldn't want to do is run on the assumption that you can just add, convert one of the bathrooms into a half bath and, put in a washer and dryer or something like that. That's not always the case. There are some buildings where that's possible. They actually have like the infrastructure in place to be able to handle that. But there are many buildings that have been built that just cannot withstand having washers and dryers in the units. So, you would spend a lot of money investing in a place, including closing costs and all of those things. And it would be sad to find out that you weren't able to do that in your building. So that's something that if it matters to you, you should definitely talk to your realtor about that before you invest in a property that doesn't have a washer and dryer in unit, because you can't always add it. So that is something that you would definitely want to think about. Overall, as someone who has purchased now multiple homes in my life of various kinds, I have found that buying a condo in downtown Chicago is probably one of the more complicated ways of buying a home. It's not quite as easy as just sort of like falling in love with a place and saying, oh, I can't wait to just make this one our own, because there just are a lot of factors to consider. When we were looking, we had houses that we absolutely fell in love with, or condos that we fell in love with on realtor.com, and just thought, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, I can't wait to go see it. And then we'd go see it in person, or even before we went to see it, we'd find out the building doesn't allow pets, or we would find out that building doesn't have a fitness center, or we would find out that the HOA was really expensive, and it was like, oh, that's going to put it out of our price range. Or sometimes we would get there and find out things like the windows, right? Like, oh no, these windows are going to probably need to be replaced soon, and they're going to be really expensive, or that kind of thing. So I think my recommendation really overall is, in addition to knowing your monthly max output, go in with an open mind. Don't rule things out, and don't try not to get your heart set on a particular unit, because you might find out that there's reasons that unit just won't be right for you. So go in with an open mind. Be really honest with your realtor about exactly what you need. What are your must-haves? What are your could-haves? What are your should-haves? What are your, can't haves, those kinds of things. What are your deal breakers? So that, hopefully your realtor can help you narrow down on a condo that's the best suited for you and your situation. But definitely go in with an open mind, because you may be really set on one and then, come to find out it just isn't going to work for some, reason. I hope this video was helpful for any of you who are looking to buy a condo in downtown Chicago. While I'm not a realtor, I did want to give my perspective as a homeowner. I feel like that can hopefully be helpful, because there were certainly some things that we didn't think about, and also just a lot of things that we found far more complicated than any of the other purchases that we had made when it came to houses. And if you're new to our channel, we are Chris and Whitney in the Windy City. I'm just Whitney. Chris is working today, but I did want to put this video together, so you just get me today. But we are a lifestyle channel, lifestyle vlog channel, just really sharing our lives living in downtown Chicago. When we started our channel, when we moved here, we wanted to find a channel that was like this, right? Sharing their lives of what it's like to live in downtown Chicago, and what are the things that, we should think about before you move there. So hopefully this is helpful for you. We'd love to have you subscribe and follow along with our journey living here in downtown Chicago, and we'll see you in the next one.